right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Lots happening this week, so it was hard to choose from. But what we are going to cover here are the federal raids on allegedly fraudulent businesses in Minneapolis and Governor Tim Walz's very, very sad attempt to take credit. And the Supreme Court says no to race-based congressional districts, which should have been self-evident, but apparently it needed to be fought out in the courts. And two major figures from the Biden administration are being hit with indictments. Former FBI Director James Comey for threatening the president with a social media post, and a former senior aide to famous alleged puppy killer Anthony Fauci. And for Unhinged, Ann Arbor is getting rid of neighborhood crime watch signs that make minorities feel, or in order to make minorities feel more welcome. That is not a joke. That's their reasoning. We are going to talk about all of this on episode 534 of the In the Tank podcast.
When you read the manifesto of this shooter, ask yourselves, how different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all. Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many.
All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lueken, your host, and as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute. We have Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and of course, Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow. Welcome back, Chris. And we also have producer Andy Singer in the background, keeping the show moving along. All right, so once again, nothing at all is going on in the news. Had a really hard time finding topics for the show. No. One of the things I decided to save for the Comey indictment topic today is the recent major assassination attempt on President Trump and his cabinet. It's kind of insane, though. We can talk about this a little bit just at the intro here. How this is just kind of like normal news at this point. It's still crazy, but I feel like the news cycle moved on really fast this time.
Yeah, that's I added that to our intro. I added that little stinger at the end because I thought, hey, I did that on Monday, I think. Hey, we'll probably be talking about this. I'll drop that in there. We will talk about it a little bit. But yeah, I'm trying to imagine what the media coverage would be like if this happened during Obama's presidency. If somebody had came within, 30 yards with fully armed, with shooting up the White House Correspondents Association dinner. I think we might. It still might be the lead story on most of the cable news nets today. I'm pretty sure we'd probably have all these news specials on the networks talking about it all the time. It left the news cycle before the weekend was over, and it happened on Saturday. It's crazy. I mean, we can get into it more in the when we get further along in the show today, but it's the idea that it's become routine for people to attempt to kill the president of the United States and the media just basically brushes it off. It's shocking and it's really disturbing, to be frank.
Yeah. Well, and part of my, sorry, Sam, just a second. Part of my argument for not having it be its own category this time is just kind of like, what do we say about this that we haven't said every other time? that there's like a crazier, what do we say about this that we don't say on Unhinged almost every week, right? That the rhetoric is getting so absurd from the left that it's no surprise whatsoever that there's all these attacks. And Sam, sorry for cutting you off there.
Oh, no problem. I think the one thing we can say is that this kind of rhetoric is clearly leading to assassination attempts, and assassination attempts make a person feel unwelcome. And so we should turn that around.
I kind of also equate this with what happened with the murder of that United Healthcare CEO and some other prominent figures. I think that we live in a day and age in which murder is becoming more or less justified by a big part of the public. And although this person obviously didn't commit murder, the fact that I think a big part of the public is saying, well, actually he had the right motives, and like he had the right intention is really scary. Really, really.
Everybody knows you never go full retard.
I don't know about that drop on this one, Andy. But yeah, it's the justification is, they say, how many times, can the media call Trump Hitler before someone's like, well, I would have killed Hitler, and then go after him. And so we'll get into it a bit more in the Comey section, but I just wanted to open it up with that. This is serious, you guys. And it's I don't think this is the last time we're going to see this, which is very unfortunate. But before we get started here, if we want to support this show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up on the video. Once again, I see all you guys in the comments. All of you have no excuse. Go hit the like button if you so please. Anyway, and remember that sharing it can also help break through some of YouTube's suppression. And even just leaving a comment helps us too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right, so I'm going to get us into Unhinged. This is a bit of a different kind of topic, but it is related to our intro because the left is just crazy. There's really no other way to. They don't hear the things they say, or if they do, I don't know how they justify this stuff. So I'm filing this situation under the category of the bigotry of low expectations. I know we have a good number of minority or non-white viewers here, so I would love to see your input on this insaneness in the comments here. So we have from the post-millennial, Ann Arbor removes the last neighborhood crime watch sign to be inclusive to people of color. Ann Arbor, Michigan has removed all of their neighborhood crime watch signs. The last one was torn last week in a ceremony attended by City Council members Cynthia Harrison and Jen Iyer, along with Mayor Christopher Taylor. They took down the signs to be inclusive and to make people of color feel welcome. We want to be inclusive, Harrison said, and there are people that don't feel welcome, and that's not who we are. That does not align with our values, and so this is a great day. There were 600 blue and white neighborhood crime watch signs in the city as of December, but now they are all gone. The removal of the signs comes after the Neighborhood Crime Watch program has substantially ended. The city hasn't had an active neighborhood watch program for years, reports WAMU. Critics say it didn't reduce crime nearly as much as it targeted people of color. Speaking to Michigan Daily in January after the city council voted to remove the signs, a college freshman said, seeing signage in the surrounding areas of their school could feel like there's a level of surveillance and suspicion. That feeling is particularly more acute for students of color, especially if you come from somewhere where you have experienced or are familiar with racialized suspicion, the student said. Some students living in these neighborhoods might feel safer seeing any signage, so I can understand that it would potentially improve their sense of safety, but I don't see how signs that promote vigilance would foster any sense of belonging. All right. So that's nice. I understand taking down the signs of the community watch hotline was, no longer active, which it apparently wasn't. And there just wasn't an organized system for it anymore. But I mean, Chris, why on earth did they need to frame it this way with their ceremony in like a racial context? Do they really think that taking down these signs is going to stop some like hyper paranoid old lady from calling the cops on like kids riding bikes or a black guy in their neighborhood they don't recognize? Of course it's not going to.
This is virtue signaling. And Ann Arbor, Michigan, I am somewhat experienced with it because my aunt lives there, and my sister went to University of Michigan, so I visited a bunch of times, and we've gone back in the years since for, other things. Ann Arbor, Michigan is about as liberal a town as I think I've ever been in. I mean, it was everywhere you go, it is it is, just radical leftists and signs and all sorts of stuff. So this does not surprise me. This is probably, par for the course in a place like Ann Arbor. It's not going to actually do anything. It's not going to, help with crime in those areas, but it's going to make those council members, feel better about themselves. So that's what this is all about. And it's sad.
Yeah, one of our viewers points out that Rush Limbaugh would have said this is symbolism over substance. But what's the symbolism here that they're suggesting?
It's interesting because when you stop doing a program of some sort, you take down the signs. Yes, you take down the road signs for it. But you don't have a ceremony. You just take them down because they're not relevant anymore. But you have a ceremony. It's almost as if these politicians were trying to signal that they have some particular virtue. And that virtue is the idea that, well, we are welcoming to everyone of every kind, no matter what they look like, and blah, 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 which is fine. But the point is that what you are saying, though, when you characterize it as a racial matter, then you're saying that people associate crime with a particular look. Now, you're the ones who are saying that. I didn't hear anyone else saying it. Nobody on the neighborhood watch was saying, hey, look out for people who look a particular way, except insofar as, yes, a particular way if they're driving their car fast through the neighborhood, or they're obviously going around to the backs of houses that are unoccupied at the moment. Those are signs that there may be crime about to happen. And that's what these crime watches are for. But to characterize it as being a social issue, that watching out for crime makes people feel uncomfortable because they are themselves then being seen as criminals or potential criminals, well, that's just stupid and wrong. But that's the way things go nowadays.
Yeah, I'm with Sam. I mean, the reading the story, a couple things struck me. One is like, it really warranted a ceremony, a public ceremony to remove neighborhood watch signs. I mean, geez, aren't there more important things that I'd actually be in favor of ceremonies for filling potholes. That's probably something that's better for the city to be doing, especially in the spring. But, I remember being a kid. I lived in Dayton, Ohio for a little bit. And I remember walking around my neighborhood and I would see those neighborhood watch signs, on the street. And, it, as a kid, it made me feel safer. And what it meant to me was that my neighbors were looking out for each other. What's wrong with that? It made me feel safer as a kid. Maybe it didn't have anything. It's mostly just a for show thing anyway. But to me, it always signaled that this is a neighborhood in which neighbors are looking out for each other. In the neighborhood I'm in right now, my neighbors and I, we look out for each other. We look out if we see something suspicious. Now you can text people and say, hey, there's something, there's a guy I don't know who should be in your yard, is in your yard. And so, this is just normal neighbory things. But, who doesn't want to live in a safe neighborhood? Does your race or ethnicity affect your desire to be safe? I don't get it. You stated this before, Linnea, but like people on the left, they see themselves as so progressive. Sam said this too, so progressive and so virtuous. But they're obsessed with race that like they don't even hear themselves. I mean, do you hear what's coming out of your mouth? Do you realize the implications of this? It's so patronizing. And reading through that story, the first reference to it would make minorities not feel comfortable in our neighborhood. I thought, oh, that's just a one-off. Literally every other paragraph was making the same point over and over again. Yeah. Because the people in Ann Arbor were making the point over and over again. It's like, do you even hear yourselves? This obsession with race, and we're going to get into it, I guess, with the Supreme Court decision in a little bit. It's not healthy, and it can turn into a situation where you're publicly stepping on rakes all the time, and you don't even realize what's going on.
I remember when I was a kid, the neighborhood watch sign in our area was like like a silhouette of a guy in like a trench coat with the collar pulled up and the top and like the fedora hat,
Right.
like a mobster or something creeping around with a nice big like X over him. And man, that was cute. But I wonder if there's a bigger, underlaying societal change here that we're becoming, I guess, um more fractured in our neighborhood security, because now there he is. That's the guy. When I was a kid, I thought it looked like a bird or something opening its beak. But the I wonder if we're becoming like more isolated in the way that we defend ourselves, in that like we all just have Blink cameras now. We all just have our own little security systems and stuff. And so maybe that's why the neighborhood watch isn't so much a thing, because there really isn't like a community in a lot of places anymore. And I think that's kind of a bad sign, probably, for the long run. I think Doug Troyer in our comments made that point too. He said, it's society's foundation being torn down, hence the sign is that symbol being torn down. Yeah.
The key is that they don't want people to do things for themselves. They want people to depend on the government. And so the ring and whatever you want to call them, the kind of doorbell video cameras and so forth, those are all the public responding to the fact that these other options of protecting themselves have been taken away from them. So you've had incidents in the United States. It's much bigger in Britain, that people who defend themselves from home invaders and the like are instead prosecuted by the government. And the home invaders get away with it. And that has been happening in the United States to a very serious degree in itself. And it's all part of the state, the government, trying to ensure that no one has any authority over anything on their own. And so what happens here is that you get this situation where you want to protect your home, you want to protect your neighbors, you want to help your neighbors protect their homes, and then you're told that you can't do it, and the government makes sure that you know by prosecuting people who do it, and then all that's taken away from you. So all you can do is put up a camera, and soon enough those cameras will be controlled by the government, the state government in particular, and that's the way it works. They take power away from the individual so that you won't have control of your life, you won't have authority over yourself. They have it all. And that's this system is just always reacting to anything that happens with more concentration of power to itself.
Yep. And I'm going to move us along here, because speaking of the system trying to put more power on itself, so we have had some big raids this week on different businesses across Minneapolis. So the Daily Caller has a good story covering this one. Feds raid the infamous Quality Learning Center. Other businesses tied to alleged Somali fraud. Federal agents raided multiple locations across Minneapolis, Minnesota Tuesday as part of an ongoing fraud investigation, including the infamous daycare accused of corruption, the Quality Learning Center, formerly known as the Quality Learning Center, officials say. Milligan said that the raids come on the heels of court approval for 22 search warrants pertaining to social service fraud allegations and not illegal immigration. Both the investigations and heightened immigration enforcement in that Minnesota area followed federal prosecutors' allegations in December that approximately $9 billion was looted from Medicaid in the state. The issue of Minnesota social services fraud caught national attention in late December when independent journalist Nick Shirley released a viral video accusing and confronting businesses and daycare centers, often Somali-linked, that he was claimed were tied to the theft of government aid. The Daily Caller has previously reported that the Somali government and local terror group Al-Shabaab, that's it, may play a large role in enabling the fraud by allegedly trafficking people into the United States, with millions of US dollars leaving America to allegedly be exchanged into the hands of Al-Shabaab before being laundered and brought to Somalia. Quality Learning Center did not respond to the Daily Caller's request for comment. I left that in there because I thought that was really funny. Anyway, so most hilarious about these raids was the response, though, from Governor Tim Walz, who I want to remind everyone was almost vice president of the United States. That's wow. Your life flashes before your eyes a little bit thinking about it. So Walz responded those weeks ago to Nick Shirley's initial reporting on the fraud that he discovered by doing actual journalism and going door to door. And so at that time, Walz called him a white supremacist and insisted that there's no fraud at all. In fact, state employees said that Walz threatened and retaliated against Department of Human Services whistleblowers who were worried about fraud. Remember all that grandstanding he did about not allowing federal agents to do immigration raids and fraud raids? Anyway, now he's saying this. If you commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to get caught, and that's exactly what we saw today. We catch criminals when state and federal agencies share information, joint investigations work, and securing justice depends on it. Today's raids by state and federal law enforcement happened because our state agencies caught irregular behavior and reported it. That's how the system is supposed to work, and our agencies will keep at it as long as there are fraudsters around to put behind bars. Now let's work on a joint investigation into the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, instead of cherry picking when we seek justice and when we turn a blind eye. Right, Governor. I think there ought to be a joint investigation probably into how much Governor Walz knew about all of this fraud. But as a temporary consolation, we did get to see a colossal ratio on his asinine post here. It was 23,000 comments to only 5,200 likes. Pretty incredible stuff. All right, Sam. Most people discuss fraud from the perspective of the cheating and the breaking the law and the stealing money from taxpayers. All of those things are terrible. And our right first reaction to hearing about widespread fraud is to worry about that stuff. But there is another reason that it's important that our, federal government or state government, whoever, someone's got to crack down on this stuff, especially the really obvious fraudulent businesses where it's literally just like a home or something that's being marked as some kind of a business, and it has like 15 trucking businesses working out of it. That's suspicious. You got to look into that, because that kind of thing does have an impact on people's trust in not just the government, but the local economy too.
The states are responsible for distributing this money that comes from the federal government and following the statutes that establish these programs and how they're supposed to be managed. States don't do that. And Minnesota is a perfect example of that. And so is California. Guess what? You can look at pretty much any blue state and find that there's an absolutely incredible amount of fraud going on. Remember that if you read my newsletter weekly, the title of one of the issues was "The Fraud is Bigger Than You Ever Imagined." And it is. It's lots bigger than you ever imagined. We're only starting now to realize how much fraud was going on. Now, the states have not been enforcing it, but even red states have problems with this. And a big reason is that the way these programs are structured in themselves creates opportunities for fraud, and in fact encourages it. The structure is that the federal government decides what these programs must do, and then it sends the money to the states and says, "Okay, go ahead and build these programs and maintain them." But what the states do then is, let's say you're in a red state, and you're a really solid governor, and you really care, and you want to stop fraud. Well, what happens is you say, well, we need a system where we can match, say, Medicaid applications to Medicaid recipients. Meaning, if they're already receiving Medicaid in your state or in some other state, guess what? They can't receive Medicaid under another name or a different address or whatever. So you put all that together, and then you say, well, we'll run the computers. It's easy to do, but it's illegal. It's illegal according to the federal statutes. You can't share that information, or it's illegal according to the state statutes. You can't share that information. So what we really need to do is tear down a whole lot of things that are put into these programs and put into the systems that simply create not just the possibility of fraud, they make it inevitable and enormous. So that the system, I don't say that the system was devised to encourage fraud, but I do say the way the system is built, it does encourage fraud, and it encourages an enormous amount of fraud, just not just a little bit on the edges, as you've seen from Minnesota and California, and it's going to crop up in other places as well. We're going to get much more documentation of this, I believe, as the federal government starts investigating these things, because this is fraud on the state level, but it's also, and more importantly, fraud on the federal level. And the federal government is the entity that is collecting this money through taxes. And so they're the entity that is morally responsible and ethically responsible to make sure that this spending is honest and fair. And who is harmed most by this? Well, it's taxpayers present and future, because you're borrowing money to spend on all this. And it's also the recipients themselves, because the system, it cannot last. It cannot continue to take out this kind of money from the American people and have a system that doesn't go into a debt spiral, which is what we're looking at. So the recipients themselves are being harmed, and certainly being endangered very badly, insofar as these programs actually do any good. So if you think these programs do any good, then you should absolutely 100% be against fraud, and not just after the federal government reveals it and finds it out in your state, but long before that. The moment you take office, you should be on top of this. So that is the big problem, is that the law itself not only allows but encourages this, and the state governments have simply not done their true diligence on this and made sure that the money is going only to those who truly have been established by the law as needing it. As I say, that's different from them actually needing it. We don't know, what as you see that you have people driving Mercedes and BMWs who are getting these benefits. That seems a bit odd to me, and I suspect that they probably don't need them. But regardless, if that's what the law says, if that's what the people have said, then we're stuck with it until the people come to their darn senses. But in the meantime, if it's illegal, you shouldn't do it. And you need to enforce the law. This country has become so lax in enforcing the law. It's as if they're taking down the signs that say, don't commit crimes in this neighborhood.
When yeah, exactly. So I have kind of a follow-up question to that, but I did want to point out that one of the things that pops into my head as you're discussing this and as you're talking about just like the sheer volume of the fraud and how easy it is to commit it, I think about that chart that was going around, I think last week, talking about where all the money in schools is going. And it's going to a huge ballooning of an administrator class at these, schools and stuff. And I'm sure the same is true at the local government level within these programs. So you would think that it would be easier for them to catch fraud, except that it seems to be that, like with many things with government, things just get worse as they patch it over time. Sometimes it seems to me, and I'm wondering if you agree with this, Sam, that just like a total ground up overhaul is what they need to do to these programs when they discover that there's a issue in it or something that's being taken advantage of. But instead, it seems that what they've done is they just like patch a little here, patch a little there, but it actually ends up making things more complicated and worse over time.
Absolutely right. And you know where that happens? That happens in declining institutions and declining societies. You're heading for a crash when you do that, and you're doing the patching because you don't want to hold anyone in the bureaucracy responsible for it, and you don't want to hold the government responsible for it. What you want to do is distract attention from these crimes and make sure that nobody even knows that they're happening. Well, think about this. If people were going around murdering other people and the police were covering it up, you would consider that to be a bad thing. Well, this is not murder, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Think about that, hundreds of millions of dollars. We have about what, a $7 trillion federal budget, $7 trillion federal budget annually. About more than 1 trillion of that is debt payments. And so any amount of fraud that you have, and remember that the federal government is financed by borrowing. They're adding to the federal debt every year, enormous amounts. So you take all that in hand, and you have no excuse whatsoever for allowing any fraud to occur. None, zero. As if you had any excuse, even if you weren't in a dire economic situation and a dire fiscal catastrophe on the way. So this is obviously absurd. But Linnea, what you pointed out was really the right track to go down, which is that this isn't just a bad thing. Oh, naughty, naughty, do the kindergarten thing to you. No, it's not like that. This is the potential destruction of our entire government system on the federal level. Now, some of us might think that that would be a pretty good thing and we start all over again, but there will be a heck of a lot of distraught people, a heck of a lot of people suffering through that transition to a better society. We could do it consciously by ending this fraud, or we can be forced into it by the destruction of the system itself. My guess, as I always say, is we're going to get the latter.
Well, that's very cheery. I wanted to show I was wrong. I'm sure that the chart looks very similar for teachers and administrators at schools, but the one I was thinking about was this one from hospitals, where this is crazy. Since the 70s, look at the rate of an increase in the number of physicians compared to administrative staff at hospitals. This, of course, is due to health insurance, which the government has caused to be a problem.
Third-party payment. Third-party payment is the reason.
Yep. So, and I'm sure it's the same thing in these benefits. These benefit schemes at the state government level. I was trying to think of how I'm going to say this. So, does anybody else have a comment on this one? I don't want to.
I mean, I'm sure Chris does too. But you had mentioned you started off the story there reading just $9 billion, and that was just in Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. You got to remember, suitcases of cash were found flowing out of the airport in Minneapolis on their way. We caught some of it apparently, but certainly most of it made its way back to Somalia. And there's evidence of widespread fraud in other federal and state programs. I mean, stuff like setting up a transportation company to shuttle the elderly to doctor's appointments that don't actually do that, but they bill the taxpayers for it anyway. That's our money, by the way. The child care fraud with the Quality Leering Center being the most prominent. There's apparently an epidemic of autism among the Somali community in Minnesota, because it's an absurd number of families from the Somali community in Minnesota that are claiming their kids are autistic and collecting money for that as well. And all of this fraud, investigators are alleging that state workers are in on it too. In fact, one of the charges is that they were altering documents to cover their tracks, that they knew it and were trying to cover their tracks. Look, I have a very strong suspicion that this fraud was allowed to go on by the Democrats, who have controlled Minnesota and Minneapolis with an iron grip for many, many years, for the reasons that it was helping them politically and financially. They were, at best, just turning a blind eye to this fraud. Whistleblowers have actually even said this, the few that have come out. But at worst, they're lining their pockets and they're guilty of some very serious crimes. This likely goes a lot deeper, though I'm really losing confidence that we're ever going to get to the bottom of this. But it is simply not plausible that tens of billions of dollars in fraud that was so absurdly obvious, so obvious that a kid with an iPhone, Nick Shirley, is able to expose it just by walking around and knocking on doors. It is not plausible that this fraud was going on and literally nobody noticed it until just now. When we talked on this show about voter fraud a couple episodes ago, I said that the penalty for being convicted guilty of voter fraud needs to be severe, very severe, like 20 years in a federal prison severe. People committing fraud, especially on this scale, need to receive that same punishment or even worse. And deportation. If you're not here, if you're here on a green card, if you're not a naturalized citizen, and you're committing fraud against the taxpayers of the United States, you're abusing the you're basically taking a poop on the welcome mat that we put out here in the United States to welcome you to this country. Then you should go. You shouldn't be here. So it's either prison, maybe prison first and then out. Representative Anna Paulina Luna introduced a bill, I believe, in the last week or so, saying that the federal government can revoke the citizenship or naturalized citizenship of any immigrant or anybody who is defrauding America. That seems very, very harsh. We could maybe talk about that. I'd be interested if we had a whole national discussion about that. But the idea that people that we've welcomed into this country who have applied for, political asylum, when a lot of them are really economic migrants, but putting that aside, they came to this country, if you take them at their word, because they were, a political, they come from Somalia. It's not a great place to be. It's very dangerous. And so you welcome them into this country. And how do they repay that welcome? By stealing literally billions and billions of dollars. And with fraud so absurdly obvious, it's just not plausible to me that, again, we're just finding that, oh my gosh, Tim Walz, oh golly, we fight fraud in this state. It's like, yeah, right? You didn't actually have anything to do with these arrests. This was entirely the FBI. Kash Patel actually clowned Tim Walz about this on Twitter himself. He's like, come again? What are you talking about? This is an FBI operation. We're the ones who are putting a stop to this, not you. And I think it's very plausible that not only were the Democrats in power in Minnesota not trying to put a stop to it, that they were in on it. It doesn't seem like it's possible for this to have gone on without them being in on it.
I think this stuff has just been so blatant because even during previous Republican administrations, maybe even during Trump 1, Republicans were too caught up in this, like, well, it's not polite to poke our nose into the state's business here because, it would be kind of like mean, or it would kind of feel bad if we were to look at these communities and say, hey, there's something really fishy going on here. I kind of don't believe that you need the aid that you're getting. It probably felt like it was, I don't know, some kind of like faux pas or something. And of course, Trump, especially in the second administration here, just does not care. And none of his appointees care either about that sort of thing.
I just want to add on to what Jim said, because there's actually a lot of evidence that Walz knew about this for months, if not years, and he went out of his way to cover it up. I think I put more of the emphasis for the responsibility on the political leaders, because they're the ones who probably knew this was happening and let it happen, and then let it happen for years and years to come. While I'm not saying that the people who took the funds are off the hook, I think I'm much more sympathetic to their plight than the ones who were actually supplying the funds and going out of their way to prevent the fraud from being stopped. Like Jim said, there are documents that were backdated and that were doctored after the fact, because they did show that fraud was being committed. I also want to say that Tim Walz dropped out of the governor's race based on this, because I think he knows that there's a lot more to come on this. And I think what he's trying to do is get out ahead of the story, but it's not going to work, because once the evidence starts to really mount up and, we see whistleblowers come, and we've already heard from some whistleblowers. I've heard people that said that they've been telling Tim Walz about this for months, mayors and such, and that he just completely ignored it. So I think Tim Walz did this knowingly. I think it was mostly for political reasons. I think it was more or less buying votes. I think it's pathetic. I think it's sad, but I also think that this is what you get when you have like Sam said, a $7 trillion gigantic, enormous federal government that just throws hundreds of billions of dollars to the states and just says, we trust you're doing the right thing. That's the recipe for disaster. These programs, whether it's SNAP, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's Medicare, I mean, just all down the list, they're filled with fraud. They're ripe with fraud. They're ripe with abuse and waste and corruption. It might not even be someone just straight up committing fraud, but it's people taking very much advantage of it. And once again, it's those political leaders allowing that to happen, turning a blind eye at best, or actually knowing that it's happening and saying, we're just going to keep the gravy train rolling because we find it to our political benefit. And that is just pathetic. It's totally unsustainable. Like Sam said, I've been saying this for a very long time. This is what happens when you have a society that is on the way down. What happens is people think that the ship is sinking, and they're just trying to get as much of they can, instead of thinking, well, the economic trajectory is going up, and therefore, it's gonna bring a bigger pie, or bigger cake, and I'll just get a bigger slice of that. It's like, no, everything's shrinking. I just got to get my piece, and then just like try to run away with it. It's geez, I hope we can turn this around. It's good to see that this is at the forefront of the political dialogue, but we got a lot further to go. California is also under the microscope for their just complete and utter fraud in the hospice, so-called hospice industry.
Yeah.
And I just think to yourself, this is happening on like so many levels in so many different areas, and we're just, I think, getting the little tip of the iceberg here. But it's better than nothing. So I hope this is a tipping point, and that people just demand better, because like Jim said, this is our money. I pay the federal government lots of money in taxes, and I hate to see it just go to waste.
Yeah, and so one of our viewers, BH Bailey asks, serious question, are Republicans acting as enablers by simply being too nice? Some of them, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
If this is happening in a Republican state, then Republicans are just as bad. This is not a Democrat thing. This is not a Republican thing. This is a principled thing. This is are you spending our tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars, for the right thing? And like Sam said, we have a $7 trillion federal budget. I am willing to bet that you could plop about $3 trillion off that, and you wouldn't even know a difference. Right. And guess what? We would have a lot more money in our bank accounts, and we would have, the ability to spend that money how we see fit, not how Tim Walz wants to, buy votes with it.
Both parties are responsible, but there are different things going on in those two parties. The Democrats get this money and they get power from it. Republicans don't get power from it. They are not too nice. They are too scared. They have no courage, which is the first of the virtues, as Aristotle said. And because it's necessary for all the other virtues. You can't do the right thing if you don't have courage sometimes. And of course, the only time when you really need to do the right thing is when you need courage. Because if it's easy, it's not, you don't have to worry about it. You can just continue to go on. And that's what the Republicans have been trying to do. They've been trying to tighten up the overall amount that goes into these systems. They've been trying to incorporate principles that will cause, say, competition among states and so forth. And these are all things that the Heartland Institute, we have advocated for years, and they would help. But the bottom line is all of this money is inherently corrupting. That's how it works. And frankly, that's why the left pushes for these programs and always has been why they did.
The thing is,
they
though,
want to
if you
corrupt
want it
people.
to stop, there have to be penalties. So for the Minnesota situation, I think Tim Walz, if this goes to trial and he did commit a crime, Tim Walz needs to spend time in jail for this.
Yeah.
I also think that states need to be held accountable. So if California, for example, blows a couple not hundred, but tens of billions of dollars on these hospices that don't even exist, guess what? You need to then put that money and refund it to the federal government. Those are the kinds of
Chris,
things
I've written
I know,
this.
and I mean, I just
said
came up
that
that off the top of my head, but that just goes
whatever
to show
amount
that
of
there needs to
fraud-
be accountability. There needs to
Right.
be
Whatever amount of fraud is in your program that's been documented, your amount is cut by that,
100%,
by that amount. Or I said, or more,
100%.
to make you, a higher percentage, 150% of it. So that if you let this sort of thing happen, you lose money. That's the only way you can stop this sort of thing. And Republicans, they're afraid that people will say, well, you're against certain types of people. You hate the poor.
That's a straw man.
Poor are it all kind of goes back to the neighborhood watch signs and all of that. The Republicans are afraid that if they put up a neighborhood watch sign, that everybody's going to say, well, see, there you go. That's who you are.
Well, I also think that
they're stupid. They have no courage.
Well, and Sam, I also think that a lot of these programs have been in place now for decades, if not close to a century. They need to be reformed big time. I think that, when Social Security was started, for example, in the 1930s, the amount of fraud was so much less because it was such a smaller program in size and scale. These programs have just exploded and ballooned. And like we said, the bureaucracy alone that is involved in the middlemen, just in terms of, taking the checks and doing the paperwork and all that, that's adding a whole nother layer of cost to these things. So really, and I mean, in my perfect world, we would have almost some sort of ultimatum for the states where if you accept this money, it comes with strings attached. If you commit fraud, then therefore you're no longer, into this program. I wish that we could make these programs not dependent upon the federal government. And I wish that states would have to cover the cost, at least most of it. But like we saw with the Obamacare increasing, Medicaid eligibility, the federal government has a really good, thing on its hands. It says, here's some money, and the states go, oh yeah, we'll take that money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes this incestuous relationship. And that, I think, needs to be addressed probably at the, at the root source there.
Well, just remember, though, we're going to get reform. If we don't reform the system deliberately, we're going to get the reform from simple math. Mathematics is going to crash the system. And so it's like, well, you'll get reform one way or another. 10 years out from now, things will be very, very different. So it's just, how do you want it? Do you want it the Trump way? Do you want it the Republican way, where you tighten it up a little bit and you throw you throw some charges at maybe Tim Walz or somebody, and then the states go, okay, we'll go along with this. We'll tighten it up a bit because I guess, even though we need those votes and we need that money, we need the thievery. We get it. You're going to come after us.
Well, I think you need to ask, what is the objective of these programs? Is the objectives of these programs to make these people on these programs for maybe forever? Or are these programs, I agree with you on that. Are these programs designed to get these people on a more personal responsibility track? I don't think they are intentionally designed for that latter goal. I think that they are designed intentionally to get people to come on them and then grow, and then you have them just keep growing and growing and growing. And I think that
that's what the Republicans and President Bill Clinton tried to remedy in 1996. Yep. And it worked for about 5-6 years. And then states just stopped doing it. They stopped following the welfare laws, and just let anybody in that anybody wanted to get in. They let them in, and they said, "Well, we'll check later." And so this let them in and then check. They don't. The let them in part happens. The check part doesn't. And so any reform you make will become corrupted unless the system itself has teeth. Where, like I said, if there's any fraud proven, you'll lose money. But the problem is the federal government. We had 8 years from 2009 to January 2017, where nothing was being enforced in terms of the welfare laws. And then 2021 to 2025, January 25, it was all explicit that, well, we have COVID, so we'll just throw away all the rules on all of these systems. Well, when you don't enforce things, what are you going to get? You're going to get people breaking the law. And so the system will correct itself if we don't correct it.
Well, obviously we could probably go the whole show with this subject because it really is important, and it's also just ubiquitous across government agencies and different government programs. And there are all kinds of fraud that I would like to see government crack down on, especially right now. And it's only getting worse when it comes to e-commerce. And I don't actually know what can be done with that. But even if you specifically search for something on Google, the sponsored results will take you to like scam websites and other dangerous places filled with people looking to steal your savings. A relative of mine Googled around for a specific clothing item this past Christmas, and she clicked on a sponsored link and purchased the item through that website, and the clothing never arrived, and the scammers got the money. So that's why it's important to have really good internet hygiene. And one of the ways that you can do that is by knowing the specific e-commerce website that you're looking for. For example, if you want to buy precious metals, our viewers know that you can go to climaterealismshow.com/metals and work with Advisor Metals, who I promise, and we all promise, are not out to scam you. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. Ira Bershatsky owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. That means everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch or paid for Google ad that sends you to China or something. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is way too lacking in other places nowadays. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. Ira is going to make it super easy for you. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know who sent you. That helps us as you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. All righty.
That was some wind up for that segue, Linnea. That was fantastic.
I worked on that one. All right, so we're gonna shift gears here to this race-based gerrymandering and SCOTUS win here. So we have another batch of Supreme Court wins this week, really, and one of them has the potential, I think, to be fairly significant in upcoming elections. From red state, Supreme Court strikes down Louisiana's congressional map in major voting rights ruling. The U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday struck down Louisiana's congressional map in Louisiana versus Calais, finding that the state's second majority black district violated the Equal Protection Clause. It was a 6-3 decision. I'm not going to list off where those votes landed because I think we all know. The court held that the Voting Rights Act did not require Louisiana to draw a second majority minority district. Without that requirement, the state had no compelling reason to use race in drawing its lines. SB 8, enacted in 2024, created a District 6 stretching roughly 250 miles from Shreveport through Alexandria and Lafayette to Baton Rouge. Louisiana drew the district after a federal judge in Robinson versus Ardoin found the previous map likely violated Section 2. Alito wrote that the Voting Rights Act is not designed to punish for the past, but works to ensure a better future, quoting the court's 2013 ruling in Shelby County versus Holder. So I only want to spend a little bit of time on this one because the fraud thing was fun to talk about, but also because the midterms are coming up. Governor Jeff Landry announced that he is postponing the House primaries in Louisiana, probably so the legislators can figure out a new map. And boy, there are some proposed maps. I've seen one that eliminates all blue districts. But from a totally nonpartisan perspective, Chris, what is the absolutely most fair way that states should be dividing up their congressional districts?
So that's a great question.
Yeah, it's hard.
I have thought about this actually like for a long time. And I know this sounds really simplistic. And I know that there would have to be some sort of like math that would have to be done, but why can't we just draw like, like somewhat like simple squares across these states? I'm serious. And then just try to get the population where it's, like 300,000 like per, quote unquote square, so that it's just more arbitrary. Because when I look at these gerrymandered maps, it is so obvious that the politicians are picking the voters, and that is not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I am more than open to alternative ideas and solutions on this, other than whoever happens to be in control, whatever party happens to be in control of the state house after the most recent census, saying, okay, we're going to do as much as we can to make sure that we're in control. I don't like that one bit. I wish that there was some sort of neutral, non-biased, third-party way to do this. I don't know if that's even possible with our hyper-partisan, culture that we live in this day and age. But I wish that there was a way to do this in which there was as little political outcome as possible, and trying to really just focus on how can we make it so that this state is evenly divided and that the districts generally correspond by geographic region based on the makeup of the state. So that's kind of where I'm at on this one.
And you're looking at that Louisiana map too. Oh, there's the Illinois one. That's just crazy. And that was always such a joke. Growing up in Illinois, it was so funny to see those maps that they would redraw and they'd be like, "This one's really fair," and then it would have like a snake shape in the middle of it. And the Louisiana one is also crazy.
But if you look at the Illinois one, I mean, downstates generally kind of makes sense. It's when you get in that north eastern corner where most of the population is in the Chicago area. Look at number 13, look at number 14, look at 10, look at 4, look at 1. It's just crazy, so those are the ones where I'm really like the downstate ones. Obviously there's less people living downstate. Those make much more sense to me than if you look in that northeastern corner. And I'm pretty sure, I'm actually positive that almost every other state looks like this. So when you see like more rural districts, it's like, oh, that's kind of a big rectangle or a whatever. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But then when you look at the population centers, mostly the urban areas, obviously, it's like, what is that shape? What is that? It goes from here to there, then down to there. And it's because the politicians in those large urban centers are literally trying to pick their voters. And to some degree, they are doing it. And we got to stop this.
Yeah, I don't know what this is that Andy pulled up. This is definitely not what the map looked like, but it was basically a like completely ridiculous stripe up the middle of the state, just trying to make as many like majority Black districts as possible. That isn't that something?
That's just funny.
Look at this thing.
Look at New Orleans to Shreveport. Look
at that.
That's
Now,
fair.
you
for
know,
sure.
there is a simple solution to this, which is to use zoning to make everyone live across this entire state in even amounts. So even it
Yeah.
all out, and then you just draw squares.
So I can
Yeah.
finally move downstate and get away from Chicago. Thank God.
Yes,
That's
you would
engineering
have to.
solution,
They
Sam.
would
Okay,
force you to.
send me to Peoria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna assume that the state is a sphere, and then we'll divide it up from there and see how that works. Yeah, no, it's been crazy like this forever, and I guess DeSantis just passed the new map that eliminates a couple of Democrat districts. It's all just games, and the things that they can do is completely absurd. You could just draw whatever kind of map you wanted, and if you have, dominance in the legislature, you can get it through. And this kind of thing just has to stop. But I thought it was important that we pointed this out because midterms are going to be more and more of a big deal. And if every single state in the union is redrawing their lines right before the midterms because of the Supreme Court ruling, it's going to be one heck of a ride. So we might see a wildly different Congress coming up here. All right, but I want to get to what's supposed to be our main topic, and we're
if-
already at the
if-
top of the hour. Oh,
If
yeah,
possible,
Chris?
could I just say one last thing on that? So the SCOTUS on race-based
Yeah.
gerrymander. So what the Supreme Court did was they basically knocked down the 1982 amendments to the Voting Rights Act, which I think they made a very strong case for. But I just want to take this from a more 30,000-foot perspective. So we're in the year 2026. Obviously, the United States of America has had a history of voter oppression, especially in the South. We are all aware of that. However, since the mid 1960s, huge strides have been made in that. And I think that we are at a place in time, almost, more than 50 years since then, since the Voting Rights Act, well more than 50 years after it, where we can say, you know what, enough progress has been made where we don't have to take this into account. And I know that that might sound, whoa, oh, he's really going out on a limb here. I don't think that's going out on a limb at all, actually, because I feel like a lot of these programs that we put in place in the 1960s, 1950s, 1970s, such as, these voting, districts and other things, that the time has come to reassess them. And that might make a lot of people upset, but I think that shows the progress that we've made over the past 50 to 60 years.
Yep. Alrighty, I'm going to move us along. For anybody else, I'm sorry, Jim, I'm cutting you off. Jim has not gotten to talk very much, but I'm going to you first on this one, Jim. So Fauci advisor and Comey are both indicted this week. We're going to start with Comey. Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted over an alleged threat against Trump. I pulled an article from CNN, and their coping is unbelievable in this article. It's crazy the way that they frame this. So, former FBI Director James Comey was indicted Tuesday over a photo of seashells that officials said threatened President Donald Trump, marking the administration's second attempt to prosecute one of his biggest political opponents, three sources first told CNN. The charges, approved by a grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina, where Comey allegedly took the photo, include making a threat against the president and transmitting a threat in interstate commerce, according to court documents. Comey is expected to self-surrender on Wednesday to law enforcement at federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia, according to a federal official familiar. First of all, they have not named a single source in the first three paragraphs. All of it is like people familiar with, three sources told. This needs, we need something. We need people to do something about this. Is getting a little bit out of control with a lot of these mainstream outlets. All right. So the image was of seashells that were laid out in the pattern 8647, which Comey says was meant to just remove Trump from office. But it's pretty common for anyone who's watched like gangster movies and stuff like that, that the term is meant to like kill the person. It's like a call to action. And so it's my personal belief, and obviously I don't live in Comey's brain, but it's my personal belief that he knew that full well and was trying to be sly and didn't think that he was going to get called out. Unfortunately, I do think because of that, it's basically impossible to get a conviction on this, I think, without like other supporting evidence, which we don't know if they have or not. There have been other leaked emails and text messages and stuff.
Well,
from
they did a
Comey.
year-long investigation, so they must have
Yeah.
something else up their
So they've
sleeve. I can
got
tell
to
you
have
that.
something substantial
Yeah.
because this by itself, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about the law. I don't see how you could get a prosecution on this, especially in something so politically charged. But what's clear, though, is that the constant extreme rhetoric from the mainstream media and people like Comey and other Democrat politicians has led to Trump being nearly killed at least 3 times now. The most recent one this weekend in a dramatic public fashion. Jim, how are we supposed to have a country even in these conditions?
It's not easy. As for Comey, I agree with you. First of all, in case people just didn't quite get what 8647 means, 86 means kill. It's slang for kill and like kill that order. 86 that, and 47 of course means Trump. But in a vacuum, in a normal, if we were back to having a normal society, I would have thought, no, you shouldn't file federal charges against somebody for posting an Instagram picture of 8647. That's not a legitimate threat against the president of the United States. But we don't live in normal times anymore. We live in very, very different times that are crazy. And Comey, I feel I would normally kind of feel, that this was not something that the federal government should be doing. But Comey is a corrupt, lying, garbage person. He's pompous, he's insufferable, and I would feel a lot different about this than I do now. I'm glad he's indicted. And I not trust, but I would expect that the federal government has a lot more evidence, or that the federal government presented a lot more evidence to the grand jury that handed down this indictment. But then they've revealed so far, because if it's just an Instagram post, that's not going to be enough. But James Comey bragged, and we have a clip of it we can play. James Comey bragged about how he was going to go after every single person on January 6th who entered the Capitol. Didn't matter if they were a grandma. It didn't matter if they didn't know that they shouldn't have been in there. It didn't matter if they were invited in by police. The doors were open, as I hear. All those people that you saw clips of, people walking between the ropes, the politest riot ever in the Capitol, those people, he made a point to go do that. Let's just play the clip. He says it in his own words. Can you do that, Andy? What's going on? Why is it not playing?
Hazards of a live show.
Hazards of a live show.
While Andy tries to figure that out, I'll point out something else too. And you don't have to bring up the article or anything on this, Andy. You can just work on the video. But so there was a report that just came out from the Daily Wire. They did an exclusive with, I guess, Senator Chuck Grassley, who found that there were Justice Department prosecutors in the Biden administration that were talking about how they want to specifically go after like Catholic nuns who represent as like Trump supporters. And they texted back and forth saying things like, they found a picture of some religious sisters who were attending the January 6th Stop the Steal rally and wearing their habits and veils and stuff. And one of them said, "I'd like to prosecute any nun who still wears the habit." And then someone else said, "I'd like to take a special assignment of finding and prosecuting them." And that's just to give people a refresher on what we were dealing with in the Biden DOJ, the kinds of things that were going on behind the scenes that are now coming out. And I hope, I tweeted this a couple weeks ago, maybe last week. I said one of the best things that Kash Patel could do is turn his get a close group of good agents and turn their eye inward on the FBI and just wipe it out, bring everything kicking and screaming into the light that they were up to. Andy, do we have that video? Got it. All right, let's go.
Do you agree with the strategy of focusing on the Oath Keepers and focusing on prosecuting that group of individuals first in order for it to be a deterrent?
You've got to throw the net wide, get all of them, both the organized groups, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, but find everybody who went into that building. Find them all. Again, not because of my concern that those people who committed a misdemeanor are going to they're going to go into the community and reoffend. The message has to be sent of zero tolerance. We will find everyone and punish everyone who went in there so that no one does it again. We will hunt you to the end of the earth, even for a misdemeanor, and make you pay for that to send that message.
Pompous piece of garbage, that man. So I don't feel bad at all about him being indicted for this. He is guilty of much more prosecutorial misconduct and misconduct in office and lying. He entrapped Michael Flynn and was just flippant and was like, yeah, that's right. We just walked in, didn't tell him he should probably have a lawyer. We just asked some questions, and we entrapped him and ruined his life. And he pled guilty to charges he wasn't guilty of because they threatened to then, after that, put more pressure on him, did Comey, that he went after his family. Says, yeah, we're going to put your son in jail. We'll figure out something. You better plead guilty. That's the piece of shit that James Comey is. And so I have no problems with this. But he has also helped. Maybe that 86, seashells on the beach are not a great example of it. But James Comey has certainly, in many public statements, helped contribute to the atmosphere we find ourselves in America today, in ginning up people who who already maybe don't like Trump, to absolutely hate him, to consider him Hitler. Comey has said many times how Donald Trump is a threat to the country. That doesn't exactly make him unique among Democrats and people on the left, because that language is everywhere, and it has, without any doubt, fostered the political violence we're seeing right now. And all of that, do not let yourself be gaslit on this. The political violence in this country is almost exclusively on the left. It's not that some right wingers won't engage in some violence, but this idea, this meme that's going out there from the mainstream media and pundits on TV to tell you that it's a both sides problem. It is not a both sides problem. It is a left-wing violence problem against not just Donald Trump, but anybody who supports him. We live in much more dangerous times. Sam and I are old enough, not quite old enough, to remember the early 70s and late 60s of the political violence that was taking place back then. But we are in a very dangerous time, and a lot of it is because of people like James Comey, who gin up hatred and violence by lying about Donald Trump, his motivations, and the motivations and views of the people who support him.
Tell us how you really feel, Jim. Yeah, so here's another question. Here's a question from an engineer guy who said, was SPLC involved in January 6th? Was there any investigation there? Because Biden canceled investigations into the SPLC. Yeah, I think probably, but I think, like I said a little bit ago there with Kash Patel, I think turning inwards and looking at the FBI might uncover a little bit more about what was going on with that one.
Well, we know that Southern Poverty Law Center was involved in J6. That's already very clear.
Yeah, at least as involved probably as they were in Charlottesville. Right.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. Charlottesville, is proven. Yeah. J6, I'm sure that they were involved in that too. But I that's just my opinion, and I have I'm not trying to slander or libel them. But I certainly they've been involved in a lot of very bad things, and we know that at the very least the federal government was involved in J6. We know that somehow those doors were opened up and people were being shepherded into the building and so forth. The whole thing is very weird. And who was responsible for the policing of the building, the Capitol building at that time, was of course Nancy Pelosi, the House, the leader, the Speaker of the House. It was her office that decided not to call in the National Guard well before all of this happened. So regardless of whether any particular private organization was involved, there was certainly so much going on that is extremely dubious and seems to have been activities of agents provocateurs, as the saying goes, that were deliberately trying to create a reason for the government to crack down on its political enemies. That was clearly what was going on there. In Charlottesville, we know that it was done by a private organization, certainly participating in it. Maybe it wasn't all them. Maybe there were others doing it as well. But we know that at least one private organization appears to have been involved in that. In the J6 case, we know that the federal government, that federal agencies that are supposed to enforce the law were involved in it, and that the leadership of Congress was involved in it. So again, this is just a system using, as Trump's word, deep state. That phrase, deep state, is really very useful, because that's who is doing this. But they're also, as I say, private, ostensibly private organizations that are participating as well.
Well, I'm going to move us along here to another indictment that certainly will not get anybody heated here. And that is that the Maryland Attorney General's office announced that a former National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is NIAID, employee is facing indictment for his role in a scheme to evade Freedom of Information Act requests in connection with COVID-19 research grants. So get a load of this one, guys. David Morenz, 78, of Chester, Maryland, is charged with conspiracy against the United States, destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations, concealment, removal, or mutilation of records, and aiding and abetting. Morenz served as a senior advisor in the NIAID's Office of the Director under Fauci from 2006 to 2022. And according to the indictment, he, someone called Co-Conspirator 1 and Co-Conspirator 2 and others, conspired during the COVID-19 pandemic to defraud and commit several offenses against the United States after NIH terminated Co-Conspirator 1's grant. NIH terminated the grant understanding the risk of bat coronavirus emergence based on allegations that COVID-19 emerged from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in Wuhan, China. So following that termination, Morenz and Co-Conspirator 2 pledged to help him restore the termination of the bat coronavirus grant and counter the narrative that COVID-19 leaked from a lab. In anticipation that their communications would be requested through a FOIA request, Morenz, Co-Conspirator 1 and 2 agreed in writing to intentionally hide their communications from public view by corresponding using a personal Gmail account rather than Morenz's official NIH email account. Additionally, the indictment further alleges that Morenz and Co-Conspirator 1 conspired to pay illegal gratuities. The indictment states that Co-Conspirator 1 gifted Morenz wine for his behind-the-scenes shenanigans, as they called it, and arranged for its delivery to his residence in Maryland. Morenz then allegedly identified an official act that he could perform to deserve the gift, which was a scientific commentary in a prominent medical journal advocating that COVID-19 had natural origins. The indictment further alleges that Co-Conspirator 1 suggested that he would provide Morenz with additional things of value, including meals at Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris, New York, and Washington, D.C. Bat soup. You guys remember that? Remember when we were all told that COVID-19 came from somebody eating bat soup or licking a pangolin or something? This is the bat soup guy. These are the bat soup guys. This is where some of that came from. I think we would all like to see more indictments. Rand Paul has been suggesting, and he has suggestions for others that he would like to see investigated, including Fauci himself. Rand Paul posted to X that lying to Congress is a felony. Destroying records is a felony. Advising others to destroy records is a felony. Fauci did all three. His advisor was just indicted. Fauci is next. The deadline to prosecute him is May 11th. The DOJ needs to act now. But my question is, can he be indicted? He was granted the preemptive pardon by the Biden administration. I don't know how that works exactly.
He can be indicted. The Trump administration and the president himself has already said that those pardons are illegitimate because Biden didn't sign them. So they can make that case. Winning these things in court and getting a conviction, I'm not sure that that's the idea here. I don't know that they expect to see Comey go to jail or Moran's go to jail or Fauci. I think what they're trying to do is expose the rot, and they will be successful at that. And the press will be successful at ignoring it. And the Democrats will be successful at moving on to other horrors that we must elect them to prevent. So this is all politics, and it's all a big game. But this is an important part of it. Exposing the rot is very valuable activity.
Yeah, but Sam, I want all these guys to be in jail forever if we can, because these were crimes against humanity at a certain point, right? I mean, maybe not like this guy who just gets his research grant funded with, a payment of wine or whatever, but that's just one step in the chain. They were pushing the idea that they were running cover for the Chinese Communist Party, for one, because China knew exactly where this thing came from in the beginning. I don't know if we're already demonetized, so I guess it doesn't matter what we talk about here. That's another point to this, is that the Heartland Institute's YouTube channel, on the In the Tank show, the very show that you guys are watching right now, our major demonetization problems, I wasn't there at the time, but started because the Heartland Institute was willing to talk about COVID and what was actually going on with it.
Let's go back to very early 2020/late 2019. What was happening? Donald Trump looked like he was going to cruise into the presidency for a second term. The economy was doing very well. We had actually just taken out Soleimani in Iran. Everything was pretty good, okay? Then this thing comes. What Anthony Fauci did right from the beginning was lie through his teeth repeatedly, saying this is so dangerous. You better stay at home. You better not send your kids to school. He knew all of that was false. We know he knew all of that was false, but he did it anyways. I still think about 6 years later now, we are still suffering from the ramifications of the COVID-19 panic by the U.S. government. And it's really sad because I actually think it has ruined so many lives. I think it ruined the lives of a lot of young people who were just told, go sit in your room and stare at a computer all day because we want to use you as political pawns to close down the schools, because the teacher unions aren't there to teach students. They're there for their own, political agenda. What did we do to mom and pop shops? You got to close down because we just say so, but the big box store, they can stay open. We slaughtered a whole generation of mom and pop shops. How about people's psyche? How about all the people that were lonely? How about all the people that were dying and couldn't, see their family at their, last days here on this earth? It's really, really, yesterday was my sister's birthday, and I'll never forget going to her birthday on April 29th of 2020. Guess what we did? This is how pathetic and sad it was. We met at the Guitar Center and stood underneath the awning, because that was about in the middle of all of us, and we brought food, and we had to do that. And I know, that's not the biggest deal in the world, but it just goes to show how out of, our way they made us go just so they could use this as a political cudgel against, President Trump. And it's really sad. They've ruined millions of lives, hundreds of thousands of businesses. It was all for politics. And Fauci was in on this from the beginning. Fauci deserves to be in jail. I don't know if he's going to. I also think Comey deserves to be in jail for all the stuff that he did. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's at least cathartic to see that this is being brought before a judge and a jury, because someone needs to have some sort of accountability in this.
Yeah, Chris, you are so right. and this is starting to trigger me now. Whenever you talk about COVID and all the things that happen, and you're laying it out very, very calmly, a lot more calmly than I am probably capable of. But the entire world was turned upside down. And you're right. We are still feeling economically, psychologically, as a nation, as people, we are still dealing with the ramifications of the decisions that Anthony Fauci made, that he knew were wrong, that he lied about to make happen. It's one thing, you can forgive a mistake. These were not mistakes. These were purposeful, harmful policies put in place in an all-out effort to make sure Donald Trump would not be reelected. As you said, Chris, he was rolling to reelection when this happened. Now, as for David Morans, he did participate. You could actually call it a criminal conspiracy to hide. He is a public servant. He is a public employee. We pay his salary, or paid his salary. You are not allowed to create clandestine avenues of communication to conspire to set ruinous public policy with your co-conspirator, Anthony Fauci. He was given a blanket pardon in 2014 for any and all federal crimes that he may or may not have committed, that may or may not be exposed from 2014 on to right before Biden left office. And that just happens to coincide when Fauci approved funding through another intermediary, Daszak, Richard Daszak, is that his name?
Peter Daszak, I think.
Yeah, to do gain of function experiments at the lab in China. So that's when his pardon starts, and it ends for when Biden left office. Actually, it was so it's absurd. But it is so. What triggers me is that I'm with you, Linnea. There's a lot of people that need to go to jail, and I don't actually even say that lightly. But no one is ever held accountable for abusing their offices, for committing crimes. And I think back to Hillary Clinton. She was Secretary of State, and all of her communications were going through a private email server and a private email address. And this was only found out kind of by accident when people started to notice, how come I'm not emailing Hillary at state.gov? It's some other address. She was never held accountable. That is on its face criminal activity. The Biden, we just learned, I think the last week or 10 days, the Biden Justice Department looked into corruption between the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton's time as Secretary of State. They looked at it for like 4 seconds and said, we're not going to do anything. So maybe the current Justice Department will actually reopen that case and to look into what was going on, because there is no other reason for Hillary Clinton to not use her government email account for official, which is also secured, by the way. Her private email server was not secured. It was easily accessed by bad actors. There is no other reason to not use your government email account as Secretary of State than to hide from the public what you're doing, what you're talking about, and why. It is on its face that way, but nobody is ever held accountable. Donald Trump, 34 felony indictments, all this, they gin up, everything is backwards. It drives me insane. They gin up fake charges against Donald Trump to keep him out of the White House. And people who commit obvious crimes they just walk off. They don't just walk off, they get rich. It's insane. We need to have accountability. We talked about it with the fraud earlier in this podcast. There is just no accountability for any bad actors in our public life. It is time for that. And if it starts with a, low-level Fauci flunky, that's fine with me, as long as it's only the start. People need to be held accountable for committing actual crimes against the American people by abusing their offices and their power. Anthony Fauci knew what he was saying was false, but didn't care, because he wanted to control the public and to basically make it so that we couldn't have a normal election and we couldn't have a normal life. We have to ruin everything because the bad orange man might win again. No, I should rephrase that. We have to ruin everything because the American people might think that bad orange man is a better president than either Hillary Clinton, or in this case, than Joe Biden, and they did decide, than Kamala Harris.
Clapper
Yeah.
Brennan got away with it. You're right. Comey gets away with it. McCabe got away with it. All these people, they get away with it, but it's also because they're I hate to use this term, they're smart enough to get away with it. I think that they know how to use the levers of power to do things that are what we consider to be like just grossly, disgusting, but they'll say "Well, it's not illegal," and that's always their little out. They've always got that little out. Well, it wasn't illegal, you know. I think the American people are just really sick and tired of that defense of it's not illegal, and they're saying, "Well, you were doing things that you knew were, detrimental to our country and to us for your own political, favoritism," and it's so sick.
Yeah, it's exhausting because you just know, and this is something that you hear people say all the time. They're like, "Man, if I did that, I'd be in jail." I know that I'd be in jail because there's no way that I would get away with the stuff that our government officials can get away with. Gosh, there was so much stuff. The last 10 years have been insane, right? I was thinking as you were giving your rant there, Jim, that we need to add the drop. We need to add the bit from Will Ferrell in Zoolander when he yells that he feels like he's taking crazy pills. Because I think about that all the time when I'm reading the news. I'm like, isn't this against the law? How is no one in jail for this? I can't believe that people have been getting away with this stuff for so long. And it's I think part of it is our government for a long time, both parties have had this weird, more so on the right towards the left, but it kind of went both ways for a while there, had this weird silent agreement that like whatever they do, nobody goes to jail for it. Like it's inappropriate to arrest a political figure. And that's just, unless they're just like some lowly Congress critter or something, then they can throw them in jail for a DUI or something. But for much of our government, it seems like on both sides of the aisle, people can get away with this stuff. I think about all the insider trading that's obviously happening. You have people like famously Nancy Pelosi, but also Dan Crenshaw, who have these unbelievably successful stock portfolios that just so happen to correspond with all these major events before they occur, major movements from the government and stuff, new regulations, whatever it is. They always seem to predict it somehow. And yet none of them get in trouble for what should be obvious insider trading. It's again, if I did that, I'd be in jail yesterday. But I don't do that. But our government does, and they don't go to jail. It's exhausting.
I just want to expand on what Jim said. Guns N' Roses have a song called Coma. Axl Rose, I love Guns N' Roses. I think Axl Rose has a great voice. At one point in the song, and it's a great song, it's like 11 minutes. It's amazing. He just, at the top of his lungs, in that really high, screechy voice, just belts out what the F is going on, and, much better than I just did. I feel like that is just like in my head, just on loop. Like every day I wake up, like another assassination attempt. Oh, like, it's, I'm sorry, but I can't get that just is like on, nonstop, on a nonstop loop inside of my mind. What is going on?
Yeah.
The rooting out of corruption is a tricky subject because it's hard for us to know exactly who did what. And we're not going to get good information on it for the reasons that have been articulated here. I think, though, that one of the things that is really worth delving into, just on the surface maybe, so we wouldn't be delving into it, but just sort of scooping this up off the surface, let's say, is that our people in power compromised such that they cannot prosecute these things, such that they cannot investigate these things.
Yeah.
And is that really what makes the Republicans, for example, look so cowardly? Since the left is benefiting from it and the Democrats benefit from the left, they don't want these things exposed. But the Republicans should, according to common sense. I'm not saying morally they should. I'm saying just for common sense, they should, because it would give them greater political power at the very least. And yet they don't do it. One possibility is that there are that people are compromised, and that's what leads to this sort of lack of aggressiveness. And the very fact, and those compromises could be in a variety of areas, of course, but that to me is why Donald Trump is so different from everybody else in the country, and why he has such appeal, which is he's independent of that. You can't get to him. He's clean. He doesn't need money from other people. He doesn't need to have dipped into corrupt ways to get things. And so they even desperately try so hard to connect him to evil things like Epstein and so forth. And it fails. And the thing about Trump is that he's not compromised. He's not. You if you're going to get him, it'll be something that's legal for everybody in the moral sense, but it's illegal because everything is illegal in this country.
He'd certainly be got by now if they had.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. You know, they've had 10 years now to get him, and they've just absolutely been unable to do so. So so we know this. We know the reason that Trump has been able to pursue these things is that he's not compromised in that way. He's morally compromised. Everybody kind of admits that he's kind of a bad guy in a lot of ways, but he's not compromised in terms of the law, and he's not compromised even in terms of politics and morality, because people have already accepted that he is a flawed human being, but he's their flawed human being. Yeah. And so I think that what we may need to look into is, are there Republicans who frankly need to be cleared out?
Yeah.
Because they're in the way too.
I've heard people argue that, like, well, if Republicans start prosecuting Democrats for every little crime that they do, then Democrats are going to prosecute Republicans for every little crime they do. And I'm like, good.
Yes,
I don't want anyone doing crimes. What are you talking about? It's once again, it's crazy pills. And I think I see, so there's no way that you got the drop already.
I did.
We're having problems with the video player. Anyway, that's pretty funny. Okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I could talk about this forever, but I do have to wrap us up here. God, it's killing me.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
The video didn't play, but the sound is good enough for me.
Okay. Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
There we go.
That is literally me every day. All right.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Especially when I read this indictment and I saw that the Fauci indictment, and I saw that it's literally the bat soup guys that are the ones that are getting caught for this. Anyway, yeah, that's all the time that we have, unfortunately, today, you guys. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. Jam, what do you have for the audience today?
We have the Climate Realism Show coming up tomorrow, Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on these very same channels, and we hope to see you there.
Alrighty, Sam?
Thank you. Heartland.org, Life, Liberty, Property, stkarnick.substack.com.
And Chris?
Like Sam said, heartland.org and stoppingsocialism.com. Lots of good new stories up on both of those websites.
Absolutely. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review there too. That helps us out a lot. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists and also to our viewers, you, the people. We will see you again next week.